For millions of people, Roy Rogers was never just an actor. He was the cowboy who always did the right thing. The man in the white hat. The voice that made families feel safe. The rider beside Trigger. The husband singing Happy Trails with Dale Evans as if goodness itself had learned how to carry a tune. Children believed in him. Parents trusted him. America turned him into a symbol of honesty, faith, family, and old-fashioned courage. But here is the part most people never saw. The real test of Roy Rogers' character did not happen in a movie. It did not happen in a shootout. It did not happen on horseback under studio lights with music swelling in the background. The real test happened inside his home. In hospital rooms. At funerals, in the quiet after losing children. In the impossible decision to keep loving after grief had already taken more than most parents could survive. And years after Roy Rogers died, one of his daughters helped confirm something that changes the way you understand the whole legend. Roy Rogers was not just playing a good man. He was trying to live like one, and the secret behind that goodness was not fame. It was loss. A little girl named Robin. And the family Roy and Dale built because grief did not make them close their hearts. It made them open the door wider. Before he became Roy Rogers, he was Leonard Sly. Not a myth, not a brand, not the king of the Cowboys. Just a boy born in Ohio, raised in modest circumstances, shaped by hard work, music, and the kind of America where survival often came before dreams. There was no obvious path from that beginning to Hollywood immortality. He was not born into a studio family. He did not arrive with powerful connections. He had a voice, a guitar, discipline, and the kind of warmth that people trusted before they could explain why. During the Great Depression, he worked difficult jobs and learned something important about people. When life is hard, a song can become more than entertainment. It can become comfort. That lesson followed him for the rest of his life. He helped form the Sons of the Pioneers, whose Western harmonies gave America a sound that felt wide open, lonely, hopeful, and clean. Then, Hollywood came calling. Republic Pictures needed a new cowboy hero. They gave him a new name, Roy Rogers. And almost overnight, Leonard Sly began disappearing behind the image of the perfect Western man. The timing was perfect. America wanted heroes who were simple to understand. Roy gave them exactly that. He was brave without being cruel, strong without being mean, religious without being harsh, masculine without feeling dangerous. He looked like the kind of man who would save the town, tip his hat, sing a song, and still be home for supper. That kind of image is powerful, but it is also dangerous. Because once the public decides you represent goodness, they stop imagining that you suffer like everyone else. They forget that the man under the hat still has a private life. They forget that a symbol can still bury a child. Roy's life changed forever when Dale Evans entered it. Dale was not simply the pretty woman beside the cowboy. She was sharp, musical, funny, ambitious, and strong in a way that matched him rather than disappeared behind him. Together, they became one of the most beloved partnerships in American entertainment. Roy and Dale were not just co-stars. They became a promise. A promise that marriage could last, that faith could matter, that family could be built even under the pressure of fame, that public goodness might still have private roots. But Dale also had a past more complicated than the clean image fans saw on screen. She had married young. She had known struggle. She understood image, shame, reinvention, and the pressure placed on women in entertainment. That mattered. Because when tragedy later entered their family, Dale did not respond like a woman trying to protect a perfect brand. She responded like a mother whose heart had been broken open. Roy had already known pain before Dale. His first wife, Arline, died after giving birth to their son, Roy Jr., known as Dusty. That kind of loss changes a man. It teaches him that joy and terror can arrive in the same room. A baby is born. A wife is gone. A family grows and breaks in one breath. Many men would have hardened after that. Roy did not. He kept building. He kept working. He kept raising children. And then, with Dale, he built one of Hollywood's most famous marriages. They married on New Year's Eve in 1947. In Hollywood, where marriages often disappear almost as quickly as opening weekends, Roy and Dale stayed together for nearly half a century. But the public saw only the outside. The songs, the smiles, the horses, the television appearances, the family photographs. Inside that family, there was a wound that shaped everything after it. In 1950, Dale gave birth to a daughter, Robin Elizabeth Rogers. She was Roy and Dale's only biological child together. And from the beginning, Robin's life came with a challenge that, at that time, many families were told to hide. Robin was born with Down syndrome. Today, many people understand Down syndrome with more compassion, more medical knowledge, and more respect for the dignity of children and adults who live with it. But in 1950, the world was colder. Doctors often told parents to place children with disabilities in institutions. Families were encouraged to keep them out of sight. Public image mattered. Shame was everywhere. And Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were not just any parents. They were famous. They were selling an image of the ideal American family. Studio executives understood publicity. They understood audience expectations. They understood that anything considered different could be treated as a risk. So the pressure could have been enormous. Hide the child. Keep the photographs clean. Protect the brand. Let the public keep believing the perfect cowboy family was perfect in the way Hollywood wanted perfection to look. But Roy and Dale refused. That is the moment where the legend becomes real. They did not send Robin away. They did not erase her. They did not hide her from family photographs. They did not act as if her life was a problem to be managed. They loved her openly, and in that era, that was not a small thing. It was a quiet rebellion, not against a villain in a western town, against shame, against fear, against the belief that a child's worth depended on how easily the public accepted her. Roy Rogers had played heroes for years, but loving Robin openly may have been one of the most heroic things he ever did. Because it cost something. It challenged the rules of the time. It forced people to look at what they were being taught to look away from. And it told other parents, even without a speech, that a child with disabilities was not something to hide. Robin lived less than 2 years. She died in 1952, shortly before her second birthday. There are losses a family can explain, and then there are losses that become part of the walls. Robin's absence became one of those. She was gone before she could grow up, before she could understand the impact she had, before she could know that her short life would change not only her parents, but children she would never meet. Dale turned her grief into a book. Angel Unaware. Written from Robin's perspective, the book gave language to parents who had been told to be ashamed of the children they loved. It said, in the simplest emotional way, that Robin's life had value, that she had dignity, that she had meaning. And because Dale Evans was famous, people listened. The book became more than a tribute. It became a door. Families who had felt alone saw themselves in it. Parents who had carried private pain felt less invisible. A little girl who had lived only a short time began changing hearts far beyond her own home. But Robin's influence did not stop there. And this is where Roy Rogers' daughter Mimi becomes essential. Marion Mimi Rogers was born in Scotland during World War II. Her early life was nothing like a Hollywood story. She knew instability. She knew loss. She knew what it meant to grow up without the kind of family most children take for granted. She spent part of her childhood in an orphanage. No permanent home. No famous father. No guarantee that life would ever become warm. Then, in 1954, Roy Rogers and Dale Evans adopted her. Imagine that for a moment. A girl from Scotland, shaped by war and orphanage life, suddenly enters the home of the most famous cowboy in America. That sounds like a fairy tale. But for Mimi, what mattered most was not the fame, not the sets, not the famous visitors, not the public image. What mattered was that inside the house, Roy and Dale were not legends. They were parents. That is the part that matters. Fame can impress a child, but love saves one. Mimi later understood something profound about why she came into that family. She believed her adoption was connected to Robin. Not because she replaced Robin. No child can replace another child. But because Robin's life and death changed Roy and Dale's hearts. Robin opened something in them. Her loss left a space, and rather than let that space become bitterness, Roy and Dale turned it into welcome. That is the real confirmation at the center of this story. The death of their daughter did not make them love less. It made them love more. Mimi's life was redirected by a little girl she never truly got to know. Robin never grew up. Robin never crossed the ocean. Robin never met the Scottish girl, whose future would be changed because of her. And yet, Robin's short life helped create the emotional path that brought Mimi home. That is almost impossible to sit with. A child lives less than 2 years. A family breaks. A mother writes, a father keeps loving. And somewhere far away, another child's life begins moving toward a home she never imagined. That is not the clean kind of Hollywood story. That is real life. Pain becoming purpose. Loss becoming shelter. Grief becoming adoption papers. Roy and Dale did not stop with Mimi. They opened their home again and again. Their family became large, blended, and unusual for its time. They adopted children from different backgrounds in an era when that was not common and certainly not always socially easy. They were not perfect people. No family is perfect. But the pattern is clear. Roy and Dale believed family was not limited to biology. They believed love could be chosen. They believed a home could be built from broken pieces and still become real. That is why the public image of Roy Rogers hits differently when you know the private story. The smile was not empty. The goodness was not just studio writing. The family values were not just a marketing phrase. They had been tested. And tested again. Because Robin was not the last tragedy. The Rogers family would lose more children. Their adopted daughter Debbie died at only 12 years old in a bus accident. Their adopted son Sandy died as a young man while serving in the military. 3 children gone. Robin, Debbie, Sandy, there are families who never recover from one loss. Roy and Dale had to keep breathing after 3. And still, the public saw them singing, smiling, standing in front of audiences, talking about faith, giving comfort to others. That does not mean they were not broken. It means they refused to let grief become the only thing their family produced. That is a kind of courage people do not always recognize. Movie courage is dramatic. Real courage often looks like getting up the next morning, answering a child who still needs you, showing up for a family that remains, singing when your heart is full of names the audience cannot see. Roy Rogers became famous because he represented the good guy. But he became meaningful because his life proved that goodness is not the absence of suffering. Goodness is what you do after suffering arrives. That is why Mimi's memories matter. She saw what fans could not fully see. She saw the home behind the icon. She saw the parents behind the performers. She knew the difference between public virtue and private warmth. And by confirming how Robin's loss helped shape the family's decision to adopt, she gave the public a deeper understanding of Roy and Dale. They were not collecting children for an image. They were responding to a wound with love. That is a very different story, because celebrity families often become performances. The Christmas cards, the magazine spreads, the posed smiles, the carefully managed image. But the Rogers family, for all its public visibility, carried something deeper. A theology of welcome. A belief that the child who arrives with pain is still a gift. A belief that the child with disabilities belongs in the photograph. A belief that the child from another country can become truly yours. A belief that after death, love can still multiply. That is why Roy Rogers still matters. Not just as a cowboy, not just as a singer, not just as a television star, but as a man whose public image and private choices were more connected than people realized. In modern celebrity culture, we are used to discovering that icons are worse than we thought. We are used to the mask falling. We are used to the scandal behind the smile. But Roy Rogers' story moves in the opposite direction. The more you learn about his private life, the more complicated he becomes. Yes, but also more human. The image does not become fake. It becomes heavier because now you know the smile had grief behind it. The songs had loss behind them. The family photographs had defiance behind them. The faith had been tested by graves. And the cowboy who told children to follow happy trails had walked some very painful ones himself. That is why the story of Robin matters so much. Because Robin was never a footnote. She was the turning point. Her life challenged what the world thought a disabled child's life was worth. Her death challenged Roy and Dale to decide whether grief would close them down or open them up. And the family they built afterward became part of her legacy. Mimi's adoption was not simply a celebrity adoption story. It was one ripple in a much larger emotional wave, a wave started by a child who lived briefly but changed everything. That is the hidden power of this story. It is not scandalous, it is not cruel, it is not built on tearing down a legend. It is built on revealing why the legend may have mattered more than people knew. Roy Rogers died in 1998. Dale Evans followed in 2001. The world they belonged to is almost gone now. The Saturday matinee westerns. The singing cowboys. The clean-cut television heroes. The kind of celebrity that parents could trust without irony. For younger audiences, Roy Rogers may feel distant, a name from old films. A cowboy with a horse named Trigger. A voice from another America. But when you hear the family story, he becomes immediate again. Because grief is not old-fashioned. Adoption is not old-fashioned. Loving a child others tell you to hide is not old-fashioned. Trying to keep faith after loss is not old-fashioned. Those things are timeless. And that is why this story still lands. Roy Rogers was called the King of the Cowboys. But maybe his greatest legacy was not the crown. Maybe it was the table, the family table where children from different beginnings could sit. The table where Robin's memory still had a place. The table where Mimi found a home. The table that remained even after loss came again and again. That is a legacy bigger than box office numbers, bigger than television ratings, bigger than memorabilia, bigger than Trigger's fame. Because fame fades into museums. Love, when it is real, keeps changing people long after the famous person is gone. So when Roy Rogers' daughter confirms what many suspected about the man behind the legend, the truth is not that he was secretly darker than the public thought. The truth is that he may have been deeper, more wounded, more tested, more faithful to his own values than most people understood. He was not perfect. No father is. No husband is. No celebrity is. But he did something rare. He took a public image built around goodness and tried to make his private life answer to it. Not with speeches, with children, with adoption, with photographs that included Robin, with a home that crossed borders, with a heart that kept making room after grief. And maybe that is why the story still matters decades after his death. Because the question is not whether Roy Rogers was exactly like the hero he played. The question is whether, when real life became painful, he still tried to choose the heroic thing. And from what his daughter's story reveals, the answer seems clear. The cowboy America loved was not just riding across a movie screen. He was carrying a family through grief. He was loving children the world might have overlooked. He was proving that the happiest trails are not always the easiest ones. Sometimes they pass through loss. Sometimes they cross oceans. Sometimes they begin at a grave and end at an orphanage door. And sometimes, the child who was here the shortest leaves the longest trail of all. Robin Rogers lived less than 2 years. But because she lived, Mimi found a family. Because she lived, Dale wrote a book that comforted thousands. Because she lived, Roy Rogers' legend became something more than entertainment. It became a story about what love does after it loses. And that is the truth his daughter helped bring back into the light. Roy Rogers was America's cowboy, but at home, where it mattered most, he was something even greater. A father who kept opening the door,